Malik sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the suitcase in front of him. He had been thinking about this moment for weeks, maybe even months. His heart ached, but he knew what he had to do. He looked over at Aisha, who was in the kitchen, unaware that this was the last day they would spend together. She had her back to him, humming quietly as she prepared dinner, the smell of spices filling the air. Malik had always loved her. She was strong, smart, and caring. But lately, everything between them felt different. The love that once burned so brightly seemed to have faded into something more distant. They had both changed, and their dreams no longer aligned. He had big plans, big dreams. Dreams that he felt he couldn't chase while tied to a relationship that wasn't growing the way he needed. It wasn't easy to admit, but Malik had grown restless. Every day felt like the same routine. Wake up, go to work, come home, eat dinner, and repeat. Nothing exciting ever happened, and the weight of it all pressed down on him. He felt like he was losing himself. The man he had once been, full of ambition and ideas, seemed to disappear with every passing day. Aisha deserved more than this, too. She deserved someone who could be the partner she needed, someone who wasn't afraid to face the challenges life threw at them. But Malik wasn't that person anymore. He had come to realize that he wasn't ready for the kind of life they had built together. He needed space, time to figure things out. So he made the painful decision to leave. He picked up his suitcase and quietly walked toward the door, his heart pounding in his chest. As he reached for the door handle, he paused. Aisha had stopped humming. For a moment, the house felt still, almost too still. Malik hesitated, feeling a sharp pang of guilt. Maybe he should say something, anything. Maybe he should tell her that he was sorry, that he still cared, but that he needed to find himself again. But no words came. He couldn't explain the storm inside him. He pushed the door open, stepped into the night, and closed it softly behind him. The drive was long. Malik didn't know where he was going, but he knew he couldn't stay. The road stretched out ahead of him, dark and endless, just like the uncertainty he felt about his future. He kept his eyes focused on the road, trying not to think about what he had just done. He had left Aisha behind. He had left his family, the life he had built, and he didn't know what would come next. A part of him felt relief, but another part felt like he had made a huge mistake. He wasn't sure what to expect, but he knew that whatever came next, it was going to change his life forever. After leaving his old life behind, Malik found himself in a new city, a place where no one knew his name or his past. It felt strange at first. He was used to the quiet of his home, the familiar streets, and the comfort of knowing what each day would bring. But now, everything was different. The city was bustling with energy, the streets filled with people rushing to their destinations. It was both exciting and overwhelming. Malik rented a small apartment on the top floor of a building. It wasn't much, but it was all he could afford. He spent the first few days unpacking, setting up his new space, and trying to adjust to this fresh start. The apartment was small, with just enough room for a bed, a desk, and a few personal items. It wasn't perfect, but it was his. He went to work each day, trying to focus on his job. The company he had joined was much larger than the one he had worked for before, and the projects were more demanding. The work kept him busy, but in the quiet moments, when he was alone in his apartment at night, the loneliness crept in. He thought about Aisha and their daughter. He wondered how they were doing without him, if they were managing all right. He felt a strange mix of guilt and relief, unsure of which emotion was stronger. During weekends, Malik explored the city. He visited parks, cafes, and local shops, trying to get a feel for the place. He met some new people along the way, some friendly faces who offered him advice or shared stories about their lives. He made a few friends, but it wasn't the same as the connection he had once shared with Aisha. Even though he was surrounded by people, there was a loneliness that lingered. One evening, as Malik sat at a small coffee shop, scrolling through his phone, he came across a post from Aisha. It was a picture of her and their daughter at a park, both of them smiling. Aisha looked so happy, and their daughter's laughter seemed to echo through the photo. Malik's heart sank. He couldn't help but feel a pang of longing, a desire to be there with them, to share in those precious moments. But he quickly pushed those feelings aside. He had made his choice. He had decided to leave, to find himself, and he couldn't turn back now. His new life was all about moving forward, building something new, something different. Still, as the days passed, the loneliness didn't disappear. Malik found himself thinking more and more about his past, about Aisha, their life together, and the family he had left behind. He began to wonder if he had made the right decision. Was this new beginning truly what he needed, or had he just run away from the responsibilities that came with love and family? As he lay in bed that night, staring up at the ceiling, Malik realized that despite all the excitement of starting over, he wasn't sure where this journey was taking him. He had walked away from everything he knew, but now he had to figure out who he was without it. The question was, would he ever be truly happy in this new life? You said. Malik was sitting at his desk at work when his phone rang. He looked at the screen, surprised to see Aisha's name appear. It had been a while since they last spoke. Malik had kept his distance, thinking it would be easier for both of them to move on. But now, as he hesitated to answer, he felt a nervous lump form in his throat. He wasn't sure what she needed or what to say, but something told him that this call would change everything. He pressed the answer button. "Malik, we need to talk," Aisha said, her voice sounding calm, but there was something in it that made him feel uneasy. "What's going on?" Malik asked, trying to sound casual, though his heart was racing. Aisha paused for a moment before speaking again. "Malik, I'm pregnant, and it's not just one baby. It's 4. I'm having quadruplets." Malik's breath caught in his throat. He sat frozen in his chair, unable to fully comprehend what she had just said. 4 babies, quadruplets. The news hit him like a wave, overwhelming and confusing. He had only left months ago, convinced that starting a new life was the right choice. But now his past was coming back in a way he never expected. 4, Malik whispered, trying to process the words. "Are you sure?" "Yes, the doctors confirmed it," Aisha replied, her voice steady. "I know this is a shock, but I just wanted you to know. I understand if you're not ready for this, but I thought you should know." Malik didn't know what to say. His mind was spinning. He had never planned for something like this. He had left because he felt he needed to escape from the responsibilities of family life. But now it seemed that those responsibilities were coming back in a big way. 4 babies. It was overwhelming to even think about. "I didn't expect this," Malik finally said, his voice full of uncertainty. "I don't know if I can handle all of this right now, Aisha. I wasn't ready to be a father again." "I understand, Malik," Aisha said quietly. "I just wanted to tell you. I don't expect you to come back right away or do anything that you're not ready for, but I thought you should know." Malik sat back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. His mind was racing. What should he do? He had already made the decision to leave, to focus on himself. But now it felt like everything had changed. How could he walk away again? He couldn't ignore the fact that these were his children, his responsibility. But he wasn't sure if he was ready for this new chapter. "Let me think about it, Aisha," Malik said, his voice shaking slightly. "I need some time to process this." "Take all the time you need," Aisha replied. "Just know that I'm here, and we'll figure it out." As Malik ended the call, he sat in silence. He didn't know what to do, but one thing was certain. His life was about to change in ways he never imagined. 4 babies, quadruplets. It felt like a dream, but it was his reality now. And he had to face it, whether he was ready or not. Malik couldn't stop thinking about the phone call. 4 babies. It was all he could focus on as the days passed. He had left his family behind, thinking it was the only way to find himself. But now he felt like the weight of the world was back on his shoulders. Quadruplets. He had never imagined his life would take such a turn. The excitement of his new life in the city now felt distant compared to the responsibility awaiting him. At first, Malik thought about running away from it all. He could stay in his new life, away from the pressures of fatherhood. He could focus on his career, on finding his place in this big city, and leave the past where it belonged. After all, he wasn't the one who had made the decision to have more children. He wasn't the one who had planned this. But as the days wore on, Malik found that he couldn't ignore the growing feeling inside him. He had always been taught that family was important, that being a father was a big responsibility. He couldn't simply walk away from that. He thought about Aisha, raising 4 children on her own. It wasn't fair to her, and it wasn't fair to his children. Despite everything, they were still his family. He walked around his apartment, restless, trying to sort through his emotions. The excitement of the city, the new people he had met, all felt so far away now. What was he really running from? What was he hoping to find by leaving his family? Was the answer really to keep running, or was it time to face the truth? Malik knew that he had to make a decision. He couldn't keep living in uncertainty. He had to decide whether to stay away and continue his life alone, or go back and face the reality of fatherhood. The thought of being a father to 4 babies was overwhelming. How would he manage it all? How could he balance his career, his dreams, and being there for his children? He remembered the sound of Aisha's voice during their last conversation. She had been calm and understanding, but Malik knew she was probably struggling too. Raising quadruplets on her own would not be easy, and he had been a part of creating that reality. He couldn't pretend that it didn't matter. He owed it to her, and to the children, to try. The next day, Malik made his decision. He packed his bags and called a cab to take him back to his old life, back to Aisha and the family he had left behind. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, and he didn't know how it would turn out, but he couldn't keep running anymore. It was time to face the responsibilities he had avoided for so long. As the cab drove through the streets, Malik felt a mix of nerves and determination. He didn't know what to expect when he arrived, but he was ready to try. This time, he would be there for his family. This time, he would try to be the man he knew he could be. When Malik arrived back at the house, his heart raced. It felt like a lifetime since he had walked out the door, leaving Aisha and their daughter behind. Everything around him looked the same. The old couch, the pictures on the wall, the kitchen table where they had shared so many meals together. But inside, it felt different. The air was thick with unspoken words and emotions that hadn't been dealt with. Aisha was sitting in the living room, reading a book. She looked up when Malik walked in. Her eyes showed no surprise, just a quiet, steady calm. It was clear she had been expecting him, but Malik wasn't sure if he was ready for the conversation that was coming. He stood there for a moment, unsure of what to say. The last time they had been together, their relationship had been strained, filled with too many unsaid things. He had left without an explanation, without understanding how it might hurt her. But now he was back. He wasn't sure what would happen next, but he was ready to try and make things right. "Aisha," Malik finally said, his voice soft. "I'm here. I know I made a mistake leaving, and I'm sorry. I want to try again. For the kids, for us." Aisha set the book down and stood up slowly. She didn't say anything at first, just looked at him with a mix of emotions. Hurt, uncertainty, but also a hint of hope. She had always loved Malik, but his sudden departure had left a hole in her heart. She had learned to keep going, to be strong for their daughter, but the weight of raising 4 children alone felt like too much. "I'm glad you're back, Malik," she said, her voice steady, but with a slight tremble. "But things aren't the same. We can't just pick up where we left off. I've changed. I've had to. And you have too. We'll need time if we're going to figure this out." Malik nodded. He understood. He had no idea what had been going through her mind while he was gone, but he knew it hadn't been easy. Raising 4 babies was no small task. He could see the exhaustion in her eyes, the way she carried herself with quiet strength. He had to respect that. "Let's take it one step at a time," Malik said, hoping that his words would show her that he wasn't just saying what she wanted to hear. He was ready to prove it with his actions. He wanted to be there for her, for the children, for their family. He had a lot to make up for. For the next few days, Malik tried to help in any way he could. He went with Aisha to doctor's appointments, learning about the challenges of raising quadruplets. There were so many things he hadn't considered: how difficult it was to manage feeding schedules, the lack of sleep, the constant need for support. It was overwhelming, and Malik could see how hard Aisha worked to keep everything together. Despite their differences, they began to rebuild their relationship. Slowly but surely, they started to communicate better, to understand each other's needs. They didn't have all the answers, but they were trying. They knew that it would take time to heal the wounds from the past, but they were both committed to doing the work. Malik realized that being a father was going to be much more than he had ever imagined. It wasn't just about providing or making big decisions. It was about showing up every day, being present, and learning to grow together as a family. And for the first time in a long time, he felt like he was exactly where he needed to be. The day Aisha went into labor was unexpected. It wasn't supposed to happen just yet. She still had a few weeks left before her due date. Malik had been at work, trying to balance his new life with his responsibilities at home. Everything had been moving along smoothly, or so he thought, when his phone rang. It was Aisha. Her voice was calm but urgent. "Malik, it's time. The babies are coming early. I'm at the hospital." Malik's heart stopped. He rushed out of the office, barely aware of the traffic around him. His mind raced as he thought about what was happening. 4 babies. The moment had come faster than he had imagined, and now everything he had been preparing for, learning how to be a father to 4 children, felt real. He was about to experience something he couldn't have prepared for, no matter how many books he had read or how many classes he attended. When he arrived at the hospital, he found Aisha in a room with doctors and nurses moving quickly around her. She was calm, but Malik could see the stress in her eyes. He knew that she was exhausted, but she was determined to get through this. Malik took a deep breath and walked over to her side. "I'm here, Aisha," he said, taking her hand. "We're in this together." Aisha gave him a small smile, the kind of smile that showed both relief and a quiet strength. She was surrounded by the machines and monitors, but Malik could see her focus on the task ahead, bringing their children into the world. The doctors explained that because the babies were coming early, they needed to be ready for anything. The next few hours would be full of uncertainty, but Malik tried to stay calm for Aisha's sake. As the labor progressed, Malik stayed by her side. He held her hand, spoke words of encouragement, and wiped away her tears. It was hard to watch her go through so much pain, but he knew that this was a part of becoming a family. It wasn't just about the good times. It was about being there for each other, even when things weren't easy. Finally, after hours of waiting, the moment arrived. One by one, the babies were born, 3 girls and a boy. The doctors and nurses moved quickly, making sure everything was going smoothly. Malik watched in awe as each baby was placed in Aisha's arms, her face filled with love and joy. He couldn't believe it. 4 new lives, 4 tiny little people who were now a part of his world. The babies were tiny, fragile, but perfect. Malik felt a rush of emotion as he looked at them, unable to put into words what he was feeling. He had never imagined becoming a father in this way, but now that it was real, he couldn't have been happier. Over the next few days, Malik and Aisha adjusted to life with their newborns. It wasn't easy. The babies needed constant care, feeding, changing, comforting, and there were sleepless nights and long days. But through it all, Malik felt a deep connection to each of them. They were his children, and he was determined to be the father they deserved. As Malik looked at Aisha, watching her care for the babies with so much love, He knew that everything had changed. His life, once focused on his career and independence, now revolved around his family. The road ahead would be challenging, but Malik was ready. He was a father now, and that meant everything to him. As the days passed with the quadruplets, Malik found himself juggling many responsibilities. Feeding the babies, helping Aisha with the house, and learning the ropes of fatherhood. It was challenging, to say the least. But through the exhaustion and the constant noise of newborn cries, Malik began to realize something important. There was more to being a father than just taking care of his children. He was also a role model, someone who needed to make a difference in the world, not just for his family, but for everyone. It was around this time that Malik started to reflect more on the world outside of his home. Aisha had been involved in activism for years, supporting the Black Lives Matter movement. Malik had seen her attending protests and participating in community events. But now, with the babies taking up most of his time, he hadn't paid much attention to what was happening in the world. One evening, after the babies had finally settled down for the night, Malik sat down at his computer, scrolling through the news. He read about the latest protests, the struggles people in his community were facing, and the growing need for change. He saw the faces of people who looked like him, people who were fighting for justice, equality, and the rights of Black individuals. The stories moved him deeply, and he realized that this wasn't just about his family anymore. This was about the world his children would grow up in. He thought about the future. He thought about his kids growing up in a world that sometimes seemed unfair. He wanted them to have every opportunity, to be treated equally and with respect. But he also knew that the world could be a difficult place. He couldn't just ignore what was happening outside his front door. His children needed to see that change was possible, that their voices could make a difference. Aisha noticed Malik's growing interest in activism. One evening, as they sat together on the couch, she said, "You know, Malik, I'd always believed in fighting for what's right. It's not just about us. It's about everyone, especially our children. They will learn from us." Malik nodded thoughtfully. "I want to be part of that fight, Aisha. I want our kids to know that they can stand up for what they believe in. I want to be someone who shows them the importance of justice." Aisha smiled softly, her eyes reflecting pride. "It's not going to be easy, but it's worth it. There's so much work to be done, and we have to be a part of it." Malik felt a new sense of purpose growing inside him. He wanted to teach his children about their history, about the struggles that came before them, and the importance of standing up for what was right. He knew that being a father was about more than just providing for them. It was about teaching them the values that would shape their future. The next few weeks, Malik joined Aisha at local protests, standing alongside her and others who were fighting for justice. He started to use his voice more, speaking out against inequality and spreading awareness. He wasn't an expert, but he knew that change had to start somewhere, and it might as well start with him. As he looked at his children, he realized that this was the legacy he wanted to leave for them, one of love, hope, and the belief that they could make the world a better place. Being a father wasn't just about teaching them to walk and talk. It was about teaching them how to stand tall and fight for what's right. Malik was ready for the journey ahead, knowing that the road would be long, but worth every step. Malik quickly learned that raising 4 babies wasn't easy. Every day brought new challenges, and sometimes it felt like he couldn't keep up. The babies needed constant care, feeding, changing, comforting, and sometimes they cried for hours without explanation. Malik and Aisha had to work together, but even with both of them doing their best, it still felt like they were barely managing. There were days when Malik felt completely exhausted, physically and emotionally. He would wake up in the middle of the night to soothe one of the babies, only to find another waking up moments later. There were times when both he and Aisha would look at each other, completely worn out, but they never gave up. They knew their family was worth the effort, no matter how hard things got. At the same time, Malik was still trying to find a balance between his family life and his personal life. He had joined Aisha in activism, attending protests and organizing events in support of the Black Lives Matter movement. But it wasn't easy to juggle everything. Sometimes, it felt like he was being pulled in 100 different directions. There were work commitments, family needs, and the demands of standing up for justice. It was overwhelming, but Malik had learned not to shy away from hard work. Through it all, Aisha was his steady support. She had always been a strong woman, but Malik saw her strength in new ways. Even in the toughest moments, she kept going. She had a way of staying calm, of making sure everyone's needs were met, and she always made time to encourage Malik when he felt like giving up. They had their disagreements, of course, and there were times when they both felt the pressure. But they always came back together, supporting each other and making sure their children came first. The couple found that leaning on their community helped a great deal. They weren't alone in their struggles. Other families in their neighborhood offered help, dropping by with meals or offering to babysit for a few hours. Malik and Aisha began to build a network of friends who shared similar values and experiences. It was a reminder that no one had to go through this alone. Over time, Malik became more comfortable in his role as a father. He learned to comfort the babies when they were upset, to calm their cries with gentle words and soothing touches. There was a special joy in seeing them grow and develop. His son reached for his finger for the first time, and his daughters started to smile when they saw him. These small moments of connection made everything worth it. As Malik watched his children grow, he realized that every struggle, every sleepless night, was a step towards something bigger. He wasn't just raising his children. He was teaching them how to be strong, how to work together, and how to make a difference in the world. His family was his biggest priority, but his work for justice and equality also mattered. He had found a way to blend both, knowing that he could be a good father and still fight for a better world. The road wasn't easy, and there would be many challenges ahead. But Malik knew that, together with Aisha and their children, he could face whatever came next. The love and support they shared made them strong, and it gave them the hope they needed to keep pushing forward. Years had passed since Malik had returned to Aisha and their growing family. The quadruplets were no longer tiny babies. They had become curious, energetic children full of life and laughter. Malik could hardly believe how quickly time had flown. The little ones, who once needed constant care, now ran around the house, asking questions and exploring everything they could find. Malik found joy in every small moment, from their first words to the way they tried to mimic everything he did. Each day brought a new adventure. As the years went by, Malik and Aisha's relationship grew stronger. It hadn't been easy, and there were still difficult moments, but they had learned to communicate better, to lean on each other in ways they hadn't before. They had built a life together, not just as parents, but as partners in everything they did. The love they shared had deepened, and they knew that despite the struggles, they had something beautiful. Malik had also changed in ways he hadn't expected. When he first left, he had been looking for something outside of his family. He thought that if he followed his own dreams, he would find happiness. But he had learned that true happiness didn't come from running away. It came from embracing the responsibilities that mattered most: his family, his community, and his desire to make a difference in the world. He was still involved in activism, working alongside Aisha to fight for racial equality and justice. They had both become leaders in their community, using their voices to bring about change. But now, Malik understood that his work wasn't just for the future of others. It was for the future of his children as well. One evening, as Malik sat on the porch with Aisha, watching the kids play in the yard, he thought about everything they had been through. He thought about the hard days, the sleepless nights, and the uncertainty that had followed his decision to leave. But he also thought about the joy they had found, the growth they had experienced together, and the family they had built. He realized that this was the life he had been searching for all along. He didn't need to look elsewhere for meaning. He had everything he needed right here. His children, now old enough to understand, began asking him questions about his past. They wanted to know why he had left before and what had brought him back. Malik didn't shy away from these conversations. He told them the truth, that he had made mistakes, but he had learned from them. He told them that sometimes life was hard, and sometimes we don't have all the answers, but what mattered was how we choose to move forward. He told them that family, love, and doing the right thing were the most important parts of life. He wanted them to know that they could always come to him for guidance, but more importantly, he wanted them to know that they were capable of creating their own path. Looking at his children, Malik felt a deep sense of pride. They were smart, compassionate, and full of hope. They were growing up in a world that was still full of challenges, but Malik knew that they had the strength to face those challenges head-on. They were ready to make their own mark on the world. As Malik watched them play, he thought about his legacy. It wasn't about wealth or fame. It was about the values he instilled in his children, the lessons he taught them, and the love they shared as a family. He knew that whatever came next, his children would carry those lessons with them, and that, to Malik, was the greatest gift he could ever give.